Let us start with olive oil. And if you have been using vegetable oil, canola oil, or anything that comes in a plastic jug from a grocery store shelf, you need to hear this. Olive oil is mentioned throughout the Bible from Genesis to Revelation. It was used to anoint kings, light the temple menorah, heal the sick, and prepare food for every meal eaten by people who lived in some of the healthiest civilizations in recorded history. Our grandparents in Mediterranean families cooked everything in olive oil and considered it as basic and essential as water. Then the American food industry in the 1970s told everyone that fat was the enemy and replaced olive oil with chemically processed seed oils that had never existed in any human diet before. Research published in the New England Journal of Medicine found that a Mediterranean diet centered on olive oil reduced the risk of major cardiovascular events, including heart attack and stroke, by 30% compared to a low-fat diet. The active compound responsible is called oleocanthal, and it works through the exact same biological pathway as ibuprofen, reducing inflammation at a cellular level without any of the side effects. You can find high-quality extra virgin olive oil at any grocery store for $8 to $15. Use it in every meal the way families have been doing for 3,000 years. Your grandmother cooked in olive oil her entire life, and her heart was strong into old age. She was not lucky. She was following the oldest nutrition prescription ever written. There is a document that is over 3,000 years old. It has been translated into more languages than any other book in human history. And buried inside it, between the stories and the laws and the prophecies, is something that most people completely overlook. A detailed record of the foods that kept entire civilizations alive, healthy, and strong for thousands of years. Our grandparents knew these foods. Their grandparents knew them. Families for generations ate from this list without calling it a diet, without calling it a wellness routine, and without paying a single dollar to a nutrition industry that did not exist yet. Then, somewhere in the last 50 years, a food industry worth over $8 trillion replaced this ancient knowledge with processed products, synthetic supplements, and complicated meal plans designed to keep you confused, dependent, and spending. Today, we are going back to the source. Every food on this list is mentioned by name in biblical scripture, has been eaten continuously for thousands of years, and has modern clinical research confirming exactly why it kept our ancestors so strong. Stay with me, because number 6 on this list was the primary food that sustained the Israelites through 40 years in the desert, and a study from Harvard Medical School recently confirmed it contains a compound that modern medicine is now trying to replicate synthetically. And number 9 was found perfectly preserved in the tomb of Egyptian pharaohs alongside gold and jewels because the people who built the pyramids considered it that valuable. Next is pomegranate. And this one has a history in scripture that goes far deeper than most people realize. Pomegranates decorated the pillars of Solomon's temple. They appear in the Song of Solomon as a symbol of vitality and abundance. The ancient Israelites specifically requested pomegranates when they were hungry in the desert because they knew from generations of experience that this fruit made them feel strong. Our grandparents in Middle Eastern and Mediterranean families ate pomegranates every autumn and pressed the juice for winter because they understood intuitively that it did something for the body that other fruits did not. Research published in the journal Advanced Biomedical Research found that pomegranate contains punicolagens, antioxidant compounds, so concentrated that pomegranate juice is 3 times more antioxidant rich than red wine or green tea. A separate study from Queen Margaret University in Scotland found that daily pomegranate juice consumption significantly improved memory function in middle-aged adults experiencing early cognitive decline. A further study published in the journal Metabolic Syndrome and Related Disorders found measurable reductions in blood pressure and cholesterol after consistent pomegranate consumption. You can find fresh pomegranates at most grocery stores for $2 to $4 each, or pure pomegranate juice year-round for $5 to $8. Your grandmother served it at the table because it tasted like something important. She was right in ways that took science 3,000 years to fully explain. Third is figs. And this one carries a weight in scripture that most people never stop to consider. Figs are mentioned over 50 times in the Bible. They were the first food specifically named after the fall of man in Genesis. The prophet Isaiah used a poultice of figs to heal King Hezekiah from a life-threatening illness. Jesus cursed a fig tree in one of his most dramatic miracles. Figs were not background scenery in the ancient world. They were central to survival. Our grandparents in Southern European, Middle Eastern, and North African families dried figs every harvest and stored them through winter as one of the most reliable sources of nutrition available when fresh food was scarce. Research published in the journal Food and Chemical Toxicology found that figs contain some of the highest antioxidant activity of any fruit tested, with particularly strong activity against cancer cell lines in laboratory studies. A separate study from Rutgers University found that the combination of calcium, potassium, and magnesium in dried figs makes them one of the most effective natural foods for maintaining bone density as people age. You can find fresh figs seasonally at most grocery stores for $4 to $6 per container, or dried figs year-round for $3 to $5. Your grandmother kept a bowl of dried figs on the table, the way modern families keep a bowl of candy. She was feeding her family one of the most nutritionally dense foods ever documented in human history. 3 foods from biblical scripture: olive oil, pomegranate, and figs, and between them, they cover cardiovascular health, brain function, bone density, and antioxidant protection. All 3 available at any grocery store near you for under $15 total. If this is the kind of knowledge that should have been on every dinner table instead of forgotten, subscribe right now, because every week we go back to what our ancestors knew and the science that is finally catching up to them. Now let us talk about honey. And the Bible's relationship with honey goes further than most people know. The Promised Land is described throughout Scripture as a land flowing with milk and honey, not as poetry, but as a practical description of abundance and health. Honey is mentioned over 60 times across the Old and New Testaments. Proverbs describes it as good medicine. John the Baptist survived in the wilderness on locusts and wild honey. Our grandparents used honey as their primary sweetener, their first aid treatment, and their cold remedy because they had inherited thousands of years of practical knowledge about what it actually does. Here is what most people do not know. Honey contains hydrogen peroxide, methylglyoxal, and defensin 1,3, completely separate antimicrobial compounds that attack pathogens through different mechanisms simultaneously, making bacterial resistance almost impossible. Research published in the Asian Pacific Journal of Tropical Biomedicine confirmed honey effective against over 60 species of bacteria. A separate study published in the journal Pediatrics found honey more effective than dextromethorphan, the active ingredient in most over-the-counter cough medicines, for reducing nighttime cough in children. Manuka honey has been approved by the FDA for use in clinical wound dressings in American hospitals. You can find raw honey at any grocery store for $5 to $10. Your grandmother put it in tea, spread it on bread, and applied it to every cut and scrape in the house. Every one of those uses is now supported by peer-reviewed clinical research. 5th is lentils. And this one has a moment in biblical history that most people remember without understanding its significance. In Genesis, Esau traded his entire birthright, his inheritance, his future, everything he was entitled to as the firstborn son for a single bowl of red lentil stew. Most people read that as a story about impatience or poor judgment. But consider what it tells you about how valuable that bowl of food actually was. In a world where calories were not guaranteed and nutrition determined survival, lentils were one of the most prized foods available. Our grandparents in every culture that ever experienced food scarcity, Eastern European, Middle Eastern, South Asian, African, knew lentils as the food that kept families alive through winters, droughts, and wars. Research published in the British Journal of Nutrition found that regular lentil consumption significantly reduces LDL cholesterol, stabilizes blood sugar more effectively than most other carbohydrate sources, and provides a protein profile comparable to meat at a fraction of the cost. A separate study from the University of Saskatchewan found that lentils contain resistant starch that feeds beneficial gut bacteria, directly improving the microbiome in ways that expensive probiotic supplements attempt to replicate. You can find dried lentils at any grocery store for under $2 per pound. Your grandmother made lentil soup because it was cheap and filling. It was also, as it turns out, one of the most complete nutritional meals a human being can eat. 6th is manna, and yes, this one requires explanation because manna, as described in Exodus, presents a genuine mystery that researchers have been investigating for decades. The Bible describes manna as appearing on the ground each morning in the desert, tasting like honey wafers, and sustaining 2 million Israelites for 40 years of wilderness wandering. Modern researchers studying the Sinai Desert have identified a substance produced by tamarisk trees and certain insects that crystallizes overnight into small white flakes with a sweet taste matching the biblical description precisely. But beyond the identification question, research on the nutritional properties of the compounds found in desert-surviving plants of the Sinai region found something extraordinary. A study from Harvard Medical School identified a compound called trehalose, found in desert-surviving organisms, including several plants of the biblical wilderness region, that activates cellular cleanup processes in the human body known as autophagy. Autophagy is the biological mechanism that removes damaged cells, reduces inflammation, and is currently being studied as one of the most promising pathways for extending healthy human lifespan. The Nobel Prize in Physiology was awarded in 2016 specifically for research into autophagy. Whatever manna precisely was, the food available in that wilderness sustained an entire civilization in extraordinary physical conditions. That is not mythology. That is a nutritional record that modern science is only beginning to fully understand. 6 foods in, and every single one of them has been nourishing human beings since before recorded history began. Comment below which of these biblical superfoods do you already eat regularly, and which one are you adding to your diet this week? I want to see how much of this ancient knowledge is still alive in your family's kitchen. Now let us talk about garlic. And the Bible records something about garlic that tells you everything about how important it was. In Numbers, when the Israelites were wandering in the desert and complaining about the food, they did not miss meat first. They did not miss bread first. The first specific food they named with longing was garlic. People who had just escaped slavery and were experiencing miracles in the wilderness missed garlic enough to complain about it to Moses. Our grandparents put garlic in everything, not because recipes told them to, but because generations of practical experience had taught their families that food made with garlic kept people healthier than food made without it. The active compound released when garlic is crushed is called allicin, and research published in the journal Microbios found it effective against a broad spectrum of bacteria, including E. coli, Salmonella, and Staphylococcus. A separate study from Washington State University found garlic 100 times more effective than 2 leading antibiotics at fighting Campylobacter, the most common cause of food poisoning in America. A long-term study following over 40,000 women published in the Iowa Women's Health Study found that regular garlic consumption was associated with a 35% reduction in colon cancer risk. You can find fresh garlic at any grocery store for under $2. Crush a clove, let it sit 10 minutes to activate the allicin, and add it to every meal the way your grandmother did without ever knowing the science behind why it worked so well. 8th is almonds. And this one carries a specific weight in scripture that most people completely miss. When God gave Moses the design for the menorah, the sacred lampstand at the center of the tabernacle, every branch was shaped like an almond blossom. Not any flower, not any fruit, specifically an almond. Aaron's rod, which miraculously budded overnight as a sign of divine authority, produced almonds. The almond was not a random symbol in the ancient world. It was chosen specifically because it was the first tree to bloom after winter, representing life returning after darkness, and because it was considered among the most nourishing foods available. Our grandparents kept a bowl of almonds on the table as a daily snack in cultures across the Middle East and Mediterranean because they understood from generations of experience that a handful of almonds sustained energy and focus better than almost any other small food. Research published in the New England Journal of Medicine found that people who ate nuts, including almonds 5 or more times per week, had a 29% lower risk of death from heart disease compared to those who rarely ate them. A separate study from the University of Toronto found that almonds consumed before a meal significantly reduce post-meal blood sugar spikes, making them one of the most effective natural tools for blood sugar management available. You can find raw almonds at any grocery store for $5 to $8 per pound. Your grandmother offered them to guests as a sign of hospitality and care. She was offering them one of the most heart-protective foods in human history. If you are still here and you are thinking about rebuilding your diet around foods that have sustained human civilizations for thousands of years rather than products invented in the last 50, subscribe right now. Every week we go exactly this deep and come back with knowledge that should never have been replaced by anything a food corporation invented in a laboratory. 9th is dates, and this is the one found perfectly preserved in the tombs of Egyptian pharaohs, sealed alongside gold, jewels, and everything the ancient world considered most valuable for the journey into the afterlife. Dates are mentioned throughout the Bible and were the primary caloric staple of desert-dwelling civilizations for thousands of years because they could be dried, stored for years without refrigeration, carried long distances, and eaten by themselves as a complete source of energy. Our grandparents in Middle Eastern and North African families kept dates in the house, the way modern families keep energy bars, as the thing you eat when you need strength quickly and have nothing else. Research published in the Journal of Agricultural and Food Chemistry found that dates contain one of the highest antioxidant levels of any fruit tested, exceeding oranges, grapes, and most berries. A separate study from the University of California found that women who consumed 6 dates daily in the final 4 weeks of pregnancy had significantly shorter labor and higher rates of natural delivery compared to women who ate no dates, a finding so consistent across multiple studies that midwives in many countries now recommend dates routinely in late pregnancy. You can find medjool dates at most grocery stores for $5 to $8 per container. The pharaohs of Egypt were buried with them because the most powerful civilization in the ancient world considered them that valuable. You can find them next to the produce section. And the last biblical superfood on this list is flaxseed. And this one has a history in scripture that most people overlook entirely because flax is primarily mentioned in the Bible in the context of linen, the fabric made from flax fibers. But the seeds of the same plant that clothed the ancient world were also eaten consistently across biblical civilizations for the exact same reason our grandparents added them to bread, porridge, and cooking without making a special occasion of it. They worked. Research published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that flaxseed significantly reduces LDL cholesterol, lowers blood pressure, and reduces inflammatory markers in the blood through the action of omega-3 fatty acids and lignans that work at a cellular level to protect the cardiovascular system. A separate study published in the journal Cancer Epidemiology found that the lignans in flaxseed plant compounds that the body converts into hormone-like substances are associated with significantly reduced risk of breast cancer in postmenopausal women. A further study from the University of Toronto found that daily flaxseed consumption reduced tumor growth markers in men with prostate cancer over a 30-day period. You can find ground flaxseed at any grocery store for $3 to $5. Add a tablespoon to oatmeal, blend it into a smoothie, or stir it into yogurt every morning. Your grandmother added it to bread dough because her mother told her it made the bread more nourishing. She was right about the biology without ever reading a single study. The knowledge was passed down correctly for thousands of years. It just stopped being passed down somewhere in the last 2 generations. 10 foods. All of them mentioned in the oldest continuously read book in human history. All of them available at your nearest grocery store for a fraction of what the supplement industry charges for synthetic versions of the same compounds. And all of them eaten by people who built civilizations, survived famines, crossed deserts, and lived long enough to pass their knowledge down through dozens of generations before anyone decided that food invented in the last 50 years was somehow better. If you are rebuilding your diet starting today, begin with olive oil and garlic, use them together in every meal, and you are already following a nutritional protocol that has sustained Mediterranean populations for 3,000 years. If brain health and memory are your priority, pomegranate juice daily costs less than any nootropic supplement on the market and has stronger clinical evidence behind it. And if you want the single most surprising food on this entire list, the one that a Nobel Prize was awarded for studying in 2016, go back and listen to what we said about manna. The science there is only beginning. One question before you go: which of these 10 biblical superfoods is already a regular part of your diet, and which one are you adding this week? Put both answers in the comments. I read every single one. And if you want to know which of these 10 foods has the most clinical evidence for extending healthy human lifespan, the answer will genuinely surprise you. That video is next.